He tio, he huka, he hohu, tihei mauri ora, tēnā koutou katoa, no mai, ki te hui o te Kura o te Waka, the Audit and Risk Committee, I tēnei rā. Please let me or the Democracy Advisor know if you intend to leave the meeting. We'll be aiming for morning tea about 10:30. Before we go on to business, I just want to note that it will be Letitia Lowry will not be with us for a while, who's in the chair next to me today, because she is going to be completing her Masters. So I just want to wish Letitia all the very best for the time that she's on leave, and we hope we'll still see you around the building and of course, after you've finished your thesis. So it's been a real joy to work with you, Letitia. I just want to note for this meeting, obviously we don't have an external chair for this committee yet. We will start the process. We've got a paper coming to council about their appointment. I just want to note we do have a lot of items on the agenda and we have a hard finish time of 12:30 today because we need to have a break before the next subcommittee this afternoon. Councillor Tiefenbacher, your big moment. So we do have to finish at 12:30, so I will keep us kind of to time to make sure we get through all of our items. And I just want to note that some of the things that we will have as standard items in this committee, we're not going to do today for that reason of time, which we would normally have the Office of the Auditor General here, and we would normally have an ELT member giving us a deep dive into their area of work. So just to note those things that would be standing agenda items we decided not to proceed with at this meeting. So we're going to, first of all, are there any apologies? Yes. Okay, great. So early departure from the Mayor. Are there any others? I will move that and Pauiwi Kelly will second. You could please vote. Ka whakapuaki au, ka mana te mōtene. I declare the motion carried. Does anybody have any conflict of interest to declare? There seem to be none. There are no minutes of the committee to confirm as this is our first meeting. And there is no public participation today, so we'll move directly on to general business. So we will start on strategic risks and update. No mai, Shamika. Mayor Andrea Reeves, ki te horo o te kōrero. Please welcome Shamika and Andrea to introduce the report.
Morena koutou. So the purpose of this paper is to provide a progress update. As well as that, we're looking for your endorsement into a couple of matters, being the updated policy for risk management. Now that just reflects the maturity journey that we're on, and we're wanting to update that for the actual practice that we are implementing, which we've outlined in the paper. And we're also looking for you to adopt the vision for risk management, which kind of sets the scene for where we're wanting to take our journey in risk management maturity. I would remind the ARC that risk management is all about managing what gets in the way of us achieving our strategic objectives. And so in the previous triennium, we spent time in thinking about what are our strategic risks and critical operating risks. Since that time, we have worked through a careful process at an executive leadership team level to really allocate out those strategic risks, so there is ownership and accountability for managing those risks and having conversations across the council about those risks. And that information will ultimately be used to help you make decisions in the future. So we're very much aligning some of this work to the work of the long-term plan, because of course good risk management is all about embedding into your decision-making processes, and so that's what we're trying to do. We do have a couple of next steps that we want to embark with you on, and that is actually defining a risk appetite. So you will have a workshop in your diaries in the near future to work through that, and that will also help us think about how we make decisions in the LTP process. Obviously, those risk appetite decisions will then come to the May Audit and Risk Committee for final endorsement. And just as a wee bit of a plug, risk management is it's difficult to get your head around sometimes, and so we actually have worked to upskill not only ourselves internally, but we've provided some training for you as elected members. So would encourage you to access that and undertake that training. It's been pushed out to all of our ELT this week as well. So we're all in this journey together. So those were my comments. Was there anything further that you would add, Shamika?
Thanks, Andrea. Probably just one point. So the more detailed report, which provides the drivers of our strategic risks and critical operating risks to you. It's important to note that for many of those drivers, there are policies and procedures and work plans that are already underway to address those. It's just that our reporting picture does not include that yet, but as we mature our reporting approach, we'll bring a view of that and more sort of rounded view to you.
Do you have questions of officers? Councillor Chung.
Thanks very much for this. Now, when we talk about risks, doesn't our appetite for risk change constantly, so that we always look at what's actually happening in the environment that we're in, and we assess the risks on that, so we can actually decide on what our risk appetite is right now. But of course, if something else happens, then we may need to do something that that contravenes what we actually agreed to, the week earlier.
Yeah, so look, I think when you're thinking about strategic risks, your risk appetite is much more stable than that. That said, it will change over time, and you're absolutely right, and that's the importance of having these regular conversations with you to keep challenging and testing whether or not we've got the settings right. So yeah, we will be continuing to do that.
Merital.
Thank you, Chair. Look, getting into a bit of detail, but in the summary of strategic and critical operational risks on page 13 of the diligent papers, under strategic alignment and upfront planning, there's an interesting phrase that kind of just made me a bit curious. It says, it refers to an unclear line of sight between projects and strategic priorities, creating interpretation bias and making it difficult to translate council priorities into operational actions. I was intrigued by that reference to interpretation bias in that context. Can you explain what that actually is referring to?
Yeah, thanks. What we were referring to there is reference to our community outcomes and strategic priorities, sometimes not having a deliberate line of sight to be able to interpret it into tangible actions or tangible projects, and as they align to our strategic priorities. An example, if I may give one, is that we may align a certain project to environmental goals, and they may not align with affordability goals, but they kind of align to one but not to the other. So that's what we mean, yeah.
So, sorry, if I may. So the reference to interpretation bias is the decision maker at the time kind of choosing a particular principle against which they'll ultimately make the decision or recommend a decision?
That's correct, yes.
Councillor Randall.
Yes, so I understand that one impact of the strategic risk framework is that when we get reports on key decisions, there's an element of connection on the report towards the strategic risk side of things, which is very helpful. But I was also wondering, how will the strategic risk policy be cascaded into the organisation so that it also is taken into account for the analysis that comes before we get to see the paper?
Yeah, that is a really great question. Andrew just said offline. Yeah, so there's a couple of things that I'd say there. The one is going back to our risk appetite conversation just earlier. What's really important with the risk appetite is that we don't just articulate statements that then, sit on our website. We want to embed these through our decision making and also through the boundaries with which all staff make decisions. Like, that's the ultimate goal. And so we do have, we've kicked off a bit of a work program there, discussing how we would go about embedding that across the organization and across all, certainly the high-risk decisions that come up to council for decision-making. So that's on the risk appetite front. With the strategic risk reporting, I guess strategic risk sits at the top strategic priority level. We are beginning work on our operational risk framework, so more further down into the detail, and we will bring further insight to this committee as to how that plugs together. So yeah, we are working towards that, and I guess that's where the vision for risk management becomes really important, because it displays the different components that need to fit together for consistent, really great risk management practices to occur across the organization and in our governance as well. Does that answer your question?
It does. And look, I think one of the risks that's outlined is the sometimes siloed nature of the council, which means that different parts of the council sometimes don't get disconnected from these things. So yes. So I think that's very important, and I just would ask also, are you able to track success? I mean, are you able to see some areas that are getting better and focus areas which are not?
Yeah. So look, absolutely. This is about building a culture as opposed to just hard and fast rules. And I think one of the other things that I would add to this is that each of these strategic risks or critical operational risks that you've signed off on has an ELT owner. And so they need to be bringing, and within each of those, so what we have done is we've created working groups that ultimately the ELT owner leads and champions and looks at those strategic risks. And those are not within our reporting lines, that's across the council to address the exact point that you're raising. We do need to get to a point of looking to measure that, and that is also why we're incorporating this into the long-term plan, because if we're going to have success in a culture, building it into a real program of work is the really important thing here, and that's why we're wanting to, and this is all about good decision making, so yes, and we need to be held accountable for that. Yeah.
All right, that seems to be the end of the questions. Thank you both. Is there anybody that would like to move this? Yes, Councillor Randall.
So, yes, I'd like to move this. We, as a big organisation, we do face a lot of challenges, and the risk side is where we pull up those challenges that are related to how we do business. And how we do business is obviously very important. We've had some risks come about, which is very unfortunate. And so that just highlights the need that officers and elected members all need to be very conscious of the things to focus on. I use these strategic risks to look at the questions I ask in terms of big decisions, and that officers can answer those questions about how they're going to get success. Gives me confidence or not confidence, depending on how they answer, about whether or not we should go forward. So I support this program. It is culture change, does take a long time, and it needs to be done in layers. So, but I do appreciate the effort that this organisation is getting into this space. Thank you.
I'm happy to second, and just to note, thank you to Shamika, all of the work that I know. We've had a lot of change in this area, and so it's been really great to have you put this consistent effort in, and I'm sure councillors will look forward to all being part of the conversation when the workshop comes about the risk appetite. Is there any further debate? All right, we'll go to a vote. Thank you, councillors. Thank you, that is carried. We'll now move on to item 2.2, assurance update and planning. No mai Yana, Mayor Andrea, ki te horo e te kōrero, and Murray from Grant Thornton. I see you're also coming to the table. Please welcome the team to introduce the report.
Kia ora. I will make some introductory comments and then hand over to the team. So I guess the key thing here, and it leads on from our previous discussion on risk management, actually a key point that Councillor Randall was referring to is that you as elected members and governors of the city need assurance that we are managing our risks, and an important assurance process within that is the work that our internal auditors do. So it follows the line of questioning that Councillor Randall just raised in terms of how do we get that assurance. This report covers a number of things. It brings to you the findings of the internal audit work that has been completed since we last met as an Audit and Risk Committee. So 2 reports from the previous triennium being previous financial year, I should note, being the asset management and the contract management area. Importantly, all of these reports have management comments in them, so you can see the perspective of not only the internal auditors, but how we are looking to respond to the findings as well as the 4 pieces of work that has been completed to date, and obviously a status update of the other pieces of work that are underway. Really importantly for your function is making sure that we have a very clear register of what those recommendations are and that we continue to report to you on the progress that we're making. So we have pulled that register together, and that is also included so that you can manage you can oversee the status of recommendations. And we're also wanting you to, as you think about risk management, as you think about this internal audit paper, note that we've got a current internal audit plan. We have that for 3 years. It will change based on your areas of concern or where you want areas of further assurance. And the team from Grant Thornton will be coming back in May with a proposed plan, but they do want any feedback that you may have on where they should look to focus in the next audit program. So it's to socialise where we're at and to seek feedback on that as well. Is there anything else you would add, Yana?
No, I think that was a good...
Murray, anything from you? Cool. I'll leave it open to questions.
Thank you. And I should just note to members of the committee that we have an amended substantive, which signals those very points that you were making, Andrea, in terms of the kind of regular reporting to this committee, and also the need to do further internal audits on the issues as outlined. Are there questions? I have one, which is, I guess, around particularly the issue of the contract management and whether the audit showed that there was any difference between the larger, more valuable contracts looked at and the kind of the smaller, less kind of financially valuable ones.
Thank you, Chair. The review looked over a number of contracts, and the way the process is designed is obviously more emphasis goes on the both larger value and longer duration contracts, because the ongoing management of what you're getting for what you're paying for is more important in those areas. To be blunt, the report really landed on some parts of the organisation have better process embedded and other parts don't. Partly that's, as we pointed out, because it's a decentralised process, so there was little control at the centre, or insufficient control in our perspective, and so we had people doing what they thought was good contract management, which really wasn't really good practice, and it was learnt from their prior experience and what people before them had done. So it was less about the value of the contract, more about where in the organisation they sat.
Thank you. Mayor Little?
Thank you, Chair. Probably a question more for Yana or Andrew. So in light of the report, the thing that struck me about the report was that quite idiosyncratic approach by all sorts of staff and officers to contract management, which suggests to me a lack of training and induction, and which might point to a culture issue in the organisation generally. So what assurance can you give us, even at this point, that area is being addressed?
Yeah. So I'm going to ask Quinton Howard, who's the Manager of Commercial Partnerships, to stand up with us and provide some of the work that we're doing. What I would say is that we have good policies in place. They weren't necessarily being followed, and that's the steps that we're taking to look to address first and foremost. What I would note is that when we decided to centralise where we hold all our contracts, staff across the council were able to identify those contracts and send them in very quickly. So it identifies that there is a level of contract management in place. You know, the contracts were to hand, they just weren't registered centrally. We were able to pull them together at pace, but people were doing their own things. And so what we're doing is looking to revisit the procurement policy, which will come to the Council Planning and Finance Committee when the committee is ready for that. And we're also looking at training and upskilling people across the council. While we're moving to a more centralised model, that's where we hold the contracts. We are still very reliant on the experts across the council to actually manage their own contracts because they know the areas best. So we don't want to lose that out of what we have. But Quinton?
Yeah. Atamaria, good morning. After the audit report findings, we put out a call for contracts. ELT supported that and required that to be sent through. In less than 2 weeks, I had over 400 contracts come through to me, so it showed that they were easily accessible. I was able to get them in. They weren't in a single source of truth location, as the audit pointed out, so that's the change we're looking at making. Since then, over summer, we've tried to identify why the contracts haven't been in that single source of truth, and we've rectifying those things. Some of those issues include the system didn't work for the business units, and they weren't aware, so there's a lack of training. So we're fixing that currently. We are going to be able to both mandate that the contracts are loaded, that they're in the system, and that they're reported on monthly to ELT. So that's a change that we've already put in place.
No, just to follow up. Look, I get all that about the kind of administration and keeping a track of the contracts we enter into. The other critical aspect, though, is the contract management. I think the point that the Grant Thornton representative made, which was about the processes we use to ensure we're getting value for money, that the contract is being performed in accordance with what we've signed up to. And then at the point of renewal, if it's a renewal sort of process, what is happening to negotiate best price, or if necessary, going out to market to test the value that we're getting. So those are skills that people need to be trained in. So are we training relevant people in those skills? Yeah,
and part of that, absolutely agree with you. And yes, we do need to support our kaimahi in those areas. Often, what we're seeing is that contracts are coming to an end. And people don't understand what a lead-in time to renewing those contracts to achieve those value for money components looks like. And so often we're racing against time. By centralising these things and identifying when contracts are renewing, by having good data and information, what it means is that we as a central function can go out and say, look, this contract's coming to an end in 2 years, 3 years' time. What's the planning that's going into? How are we thinking about this? What's the, and we can put that wraparound support. There are some areas that do that exceptionally well already, and this is the point that Murray was raising. We do that well, but there are areas that are also less familiar, and they may only do a few contracts, so they don't really understand that the lead-in time, how you work through this, and those kind of metrics being reported up to ELT also gives some visibility. So yes, identifying the key components to support our kaimahi and what they need to actually manage this well is really important.
Councillor Compton, you're online. You have a question?
Yep, thank you, Chair. Reading the internal policy on delegations, I note that there's no clause to either help or uphold delegations. Would officers consider adding this into the policy?
Absolutely. We're refreshing our delegations policy at the moment, Councillor, and we're actually taking a more holistic and wide view of our delegations policy, so we can certainly add that into the mix.
Thank you. Chair, may I ask a second question?
You may.
Thank you. With regards to asset management, and I note that there's a 3-year program to essentially improve this area, would we consider this as part of the discovery of amalgamation information and share this with the other potential councils to make sure that if something happens in the future that we're all singing off the same hymn sheet in terms of asset information?
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Compton. Councillor Chung?
Thanks very much. I'd like to ask, in our contract management, do we have an audit facility where we actually look at how the contractors are actually managing that contract? Because the feedback that I get from constituents is that, they point out that this job that we're actually doing on this particular road, this is what they're doing, this is what the staff are actually doing on these areas. But of course, and I just respond back and say that, well, this is actually contracted out to another company. It's not actually the council office that are actually doing this. But there are so many of these, and I've been given videos and photos and things of what happens. So do we actually monitor this, and do we have the ability to actually influence these?
I think that goes to the heart of the line of questioning previously, that there is probably mixed quality of monitoring of contracts. And I suspect it's done very well in certain areas. In fact, I know it is done very well in some areas, but in others it may not be. And so we're getting a level of inconsistency, which is what you're highlighting. I think the important thing is as the Mayor was alluding to, we need to support our kaimahi in training and development and understanding what the expectations are of them to manage their contracts. And us having visibility from a central perspective of what contracts are in place means that we can lean in and ensure that monitoring is happening.
Councillor Osborne.
Thank you, Chair. Just in response to your final point around feedback on the internal audit plan, I'd note that one of the strategic risks that we highlighted in the previous paper was asset and service resilience in the face of climate change. Also note in this paper, the asset management assurance review suggested that resilience planning is not what it ought to be. But in the current internal audit plan, that resilience management is bumped out to subsequent years. So I wonder, I would just make the point that perhaps we could reconsider that.
Thank you. We will take that into consideration. And just to highlight that the strategic risks have happened and the discussion has happened after the internal audit program. So that's one of the really core important parts that we have to flip it on its head and just recheck. So we'll take that feedback.
Councillor Randall.
Yes, thank you. I know that Dunning-Thornton was engaged to do audits, reasonably recently. So this audit of the contract management system was obviously prioritised. Was ELT aware before the audit that there was this was an area of real concern, and if so, were the findings what you expected, or perhaps worse, or?
I would say that across ELT there were different levels of understanding. So we all had different versions of the truth because we had a decentralised model. And so the whole point of that was we weren't seeing the collective whole, and that has been the value out of the internal audit work and giving us that oversight and being able to create some actions, quite deliberate actions at a fast pace to address those findings.
Okay, and so also given the new audit process with Dunning-Thornton has started off, and we've had this finding, even though it's quite problematic from an audit perspective, finding this information out and exposing it in a public way. From an audit perspective, that's success, isn't it? I mean, that's part of what happens when you go and do this stuff.
Thank you, Councillor. I wouldn't count that as success. Success is really where we identify an issue and it's resolved, so an improvement's been made. It's pointless putting up a report which is then put on the shelf because no one's improved anything. It's pointless overlooking things which are going wrong. So our role is really to hold a mirror up to the organisation and say, this is where you can improve. The pleasing thing is we didn't find in any of the reports so far anything that said that this is actually falling off a cliff. So this is all improvement based. So from that perspective, one of the big challenges with, so we look at contract management, is people were doing what they thought was the right thing. But as an external look in, you just can't see it because it's done informally. Really good supplier management. They got on really well with them, understood them as a business, but didn't do the formal process we'd expect to see as a contract management. But having said that, there were pockets of really good practice as well. So our role is really just to make sure the organisation understands what's really happening. Can we rely on the controls? Is it happening as we expect it to happen?
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Tiefenbacher.
Yeah, so I'm probably a little bit different to Tony. My reaction would be an audit should hopefully find the smallest of things because we're doing everything else so well. So we're a long-term organisation. We obviously have a large hierarchy of management throughout our organisation. How can I have confidence that we are doing things that mean these issues are getting picked up sooner? Because realistically, everything that's found in the audit, apart from maybe the last tier, should be found internally already through management processes and all these sort of things. So how do I have confidence that, A, there are consequences if you're not doing your job properly within our organisation, but also that we have enough expertise in the organisation? Because we pay a lot of money now as a council to our employees. We should have that inbuilt capability to be able to pick up on a lot of this stuff prior to it obviously going to the auditor. And I know from my own business, when the auditor comes, they always have to find something because their job is to find a problem because no one's perfect and otherwise they're not doing their job. However, I wanted to find the smallest things. I don't want to find quite such a large amount of issues that we found on this. So how do we have confidence that we are making changes in that there is some accountability to the management in place?
Thank you, Councillor. I suppose that the key things I would point to would be two things. In the reports, let me start again. The first thing is ELT has changed from receiving reports without us there to actually including us and discussing the reports. So the visibility at the highest management level is very, very strong compared to what it was. The second issue, which I think should give you confidence, is that our recommendations and management actions are very focused on making sure they get the information they need to make those decisions, to understand what is going on. If you look at contract management and asset management, in both cases there was a lack of information flowing up, so the one source of the truth. So it was very hard for management to understand what was going on across the organisation. That's what's one of the big cultural changes which is happening. With that perspective, then management can do its job. Without that information, as you know from running a business, it's really hard to understand where you need to change things. So, while I don't consider success to find the little things, you can almost guarantee when people are involved in a process, something won't be going exactly as you think. But if you've got oversight of that process, which is now being put in place, you're in a much stronger position.
Yeah, sorry, my question really wasn't so much about ELT, it was about the layers underneath ELT as well, so that every little bit of management is accountable for the information flow it passes on.
I can probably add to that, Councillor. So, number one, we're actually looking and having the internal audits in areas that we have got problems in and are focusing on the right things. So there was a change process that was implemented 2 years ago. Tony referred to it before, actually to make sure we're getting the right calibre of information. And that reflects, I think, the culture change that Murray has indicated, that we are having the right conversations at ELT. Now we're inviting the internal auditors in the room and we're being really clear and transparent about what we're receiving here. The important thing is that we have that register and we're being held accountable and coming back to you in terms of how we're making improvements, and that's something that's really important. It also enables us to make sure we're having the right conversations with our managers, because this is about culture and ensuring that we lead that right down across the organisation and leading by example. And so we're being held accountable, and by that we're also making sure we're holding our managers accountable. This contract management is quite a specialist area, and we grew as an organisation substantially as a result of the 2021 long-term plan. And we have, and I've talked to this Audit and Risk Committee previously as one of the things that has kept me awake at night, is how fast and the pace that we've gone at in terms of our capital program and the work that we've been doing. And I believe what we're seeing is some of this, the systemic issues arising out of that, because we've been going at pace. We have been gearing up to manage all of this work, and those things have been decentralised because we haven't needed to operate in that way previously. We're now looking at recalibrating and prioritising, and I think that will also help.
If I may add an observation to those comments is some of the issues that are now having higher visibility, contract management being a really good example, are of very high complexity and systemic level, and that requires a coordinated response. And I think what you're seeing here today from senior management, with Andrea and Quentin in the room, that's a really good example of how that's now in place. So the management response, the involvement in shaping recommendations and taking action is a change that has come along with the new internal audit model and provides a really good place for us. Yeah.
All right, that appears to be the end of the questions. Thank you very much, Murray, Andrea and Jana. I am now going to move the paper, and I guess I just want to start by saying that this is, without question, the most serious and sobering report I have received in my 6.5 years on the council. And I guess the reason for that is that multiple times over those years, assurances have been made that the sorts of things that are in the report were not occurring. And so, this makes it's difficult to read. And I do want to give credit to the organisation for the openness and transparency in response to, an internal audit, which is quite frankly damning. And I guess I want to note that through the amendments, both for, there will be some trade-offs in order to do essentially a comparative internal audit again in 2027 on these matters of asset management and contract management, because we are supporting the organisation to quickly improve in these areas. And also the additional note about the 6-monthly reporting to this committee, so we have oversight on how that work is progressing, and also the point that Councillor Calvert raised, that we will escalate any matters that we see at this committee to a committee of the whole. So those are behind those amendments. I do want to thank everybody for the level of reflection that has gone into this process, and we are looking to see improvement, and we are looking to support you in that improvement. Melita, would you like to second? Yeah, would you like to speak?
No, just to echo your comments, Chair. I think it is worrying when you read what has happened. But again, the fact that we've now brought it to the surface, it's been reported to elected members. I think our expectation is very clear, is that we do need to see these things addressed, and we know that there is cost associated with processes like this that just get completely out of control, and we want to see the benefit of that, and we want to see staff empowered to do a job, contract management and contract performance. There's a set of skills that go with that, and it's very rewarding when it's done well. We want to see staff trained up and being satisfied with the job they're doing, knowing they're doing it in the best interests of the council and our residents and ratepayers. And so I commend the resolution that's been put forward.
Is there further debate? Councillor Randall.
Yes, look, I support this, including the amended substantive. The contract report and the asset report, sobering reads, because they cut to the core of the function of what the council, of what it does and how it needs to be done. And while I fully support the audit program, which is shining, holding up the mirror, as Quentin outlined, successfully, it's not a good look. As a councillor from the previous triennium, I was aware that there were issues in the contract management because of certain issues I got involved with, and some of them unfortunately were also reasonably public. We need to deal with this, and I certainly think I would make 2 points. One is it's very important this committee, as outlined in here, holds to account the ELT members to make sure that this is addressed in a positive and professional way, I should say. But also I want to outline that this is also a culture change. And culture change is hard and needs to be persistent. And I fully support making sure that the managers within our organisation who have these delegated authorities really do understand that doing these very basic things well, like registering contracts in the system, is critical for the operation of the overall organisation. And we have been doing a lot in the last wee while. I accept that. And we possibly have dropped the ball partly due to that reason, and also staff turnover, which is an issue. But we do need to keep the spotlight on doing the basics well, and I do thank managers for grasping this nettle and bringing this forward so that this whole triennium can look to see the improvement we need to see. Thank you.
Councillor Tufenbach.
Yeah, I guess from my perspective, I think it's great to see the LTR identifying the issues we have. It's scary how many we're identifying, I guess, is the reality. What I would ask of this committee is that we take a firm line on our expectation that improvements happen, because my biggest concern is you can identify things and you can either solve them or you can leave them going. So please, guys, take a firm stance on the fact of expectation. I'm sure the ELT will be driving that anyway, but I think we need to have that hope that, at the end of this triennium at least, we are a better council than we are at the moment.
It appears that there is no further debate, so we will go to a vote. I'm assuming nobody wants to take anything separately? That is carried. All right, I think we'll do another item, and we might be slightly later to morning tea. So we're on to the item 2.3, the desk privacy breach incident. No mai Andrea again, and Yana again. Ki te horo I te kōrero. Kia ora. This is why I'm not sitting next to you today, Chair. Thank you for the introduction. Again, and we have Grant Thornton in the room as well to answer any questions on the detail of their work. I also have other members that were involved in this privacy issue as well, and various streams of work. The purpose of this paper is to again highlight the issue, what occurred, and the actions that we took immediately after the privacy issue being brought to our attention. Excuse me, immediately after the Chief Executive commissioned Grant Thornton as our internal auditors, but as a separate contract to undertake a review. And they took the actions as outlined in paragraph 17 of the paper, or they highlighted some findings in paragraph 17 of the paper. We also did our own internal privacy incident review through our privacy specialist internally. We had numerous interests in regards to the event, so Archives did write to us to ask about our information management practices based on the reports in the media. We were able to respond to them and provide them with assurance in the steps that we had taken. But we also had several Lagoima requests, a lot of media requests, which were all coordinated. So immediately upon this happening, we set up a very small team that had weekly 5 to 10 minute, well, it's 15-minute kind of stand-ups to coordinate our response and seek assurance that, number one, that we were dealing with the immediate issue. Number two, that there was no other furniture that had information in it. And most importantly, I think, number three, reflecting that we have got a move to a new building, and what lessons did we need to immediately learn to take into the move process. So within sort of a couple, probably a few meetings, we had brought in the project manager for the move to the new building to ensure that anything that we were identifying and applying, we could apply to the program of work going forward.
We have implemented procedures to mitigate those risks in the move to our new building that was applied when the parking team moved over there. So they're currently working in number 2 Harris Street. And so we have had a test run. There were certainly things that worked, didn't work. We're recalibrating and now applying to the move more generally. So we've made good progress in addressing the recommendations that were highlighted to a real life situation. We've been able to coordinate our response relatively swiftly and noting that actually this wasn't investigated by the Office of the Privacy Commissioner. This, we were able to report to them in terms of the actions that were taken. So purpose of the report to give you a highlight, to give you visibility of that information and the work that was done, and happy to take any questions.
Me Little.
Thank you, Chair. Some of the public commentary included comment from people who thought some of the documents were documents either they had prepared or received or commented on. What assurance has been given to those people who think that private details of either things they've said or done or reports they've received have been given to ensure that their concerns are allayed?
Yeah, absolutely. So I might ask Alex to come up and talk to some of that, but we certainly engaged with those people that were affected. We set up meetings with those people and actually sat them down with the information so they could see very clearly what information was in there, what that meant. We have kept them informed. We are now working through the end process of that and have continued to give them steps in terms of updates through that process. But Alex, is there anything further?
Yeah, so the documents identified people. A lot of them are no longer with us, and therefore we couldn't notify them or go down that path. That one, yeah. So we were unable to make contact with them. Documents did pertain to Mayor Prendergast, and we've engaged with her, and she sat down with me in a room and has gone through the documents. Mayor Wild, now the mayor in the Wairarapa, is also coming in this week to have a look at them. So we have carefully worked with those stakeholders. We also, through the Goima process, engaged with the guy who did find the documents, and we have tried to work with him to assure him how we've taken it seriously. But otherwise, that's the other people named are no longer around.
Just a follow-up. One of the reports suggested that some of the documents related to a performance review of a senior staff member. So how has that been handled?
Documents related to a former chief executive and his remuneration rounds. The majority of that information was in the public domain, and therefore those documents have been passed to our records team, who, against our retention and disposal schedule, have made a decision how to use those.
Right, are there any further questions? There appear to be none. Thank you. Does anybody else want to move this one? I can do it. Just obviously an unfortunate incident, but thank you for the work that has gone on and particularly the assurance around the move. I think there are some things to note for elected members about any documents that we might have lying around, and to in our, we're aware of international stories that are higher profile about people retaining documents. So anyway, just thank you. Our apologies, obviously, to everybody concerned that, and this has been a real lesson, and it appears that we are learning from that and doing different when it comes to the move and with any disposal of other furniture items or storage. Is there any debate? Do you want a second?
I'll second Chief there. And the only thing I would add is to give an assurance that the incumbent mayor has no secret place to store secret files, that everything is in a system and fully auditable.
It appears there's no debate, so we will go to the vote. We're getting through the items very quickly. You're going to get some time off this morning. We'll go to the vote. Thank you. Or we may have more time to consider some of the items that I thought we might have to race through. It's probably a better All right, that is carried. Should we have a quick break now? Yeah, let's have a quick break. I'm assured the committee before we go to the break that there won't be so many exciting items on our future committee meetings. Very unusual to see the media at an audit and risk committee meeting. All right, we will have a break and we'll come back at 25 to. Thank you. Ready to reconvene, committee members? We're on to we're going at a steady clip, item 2.4. No, my Andrea and Karina, and also a special welcome to our auditor, Fiona Elkington. It might be the first time some of you have met her. And the first item is the report to the governing body. So over to you.
Kia ora, councillors. I feel like a boomerang, and so to give me a bit of a break, I'm just going to hand directly over to Karina.
Kia ora koutou, ko Karina Young toku ingoa. I'm the financial controller here at Council, as I haven't met some of you previously. The purpose of this paper is to present Audit New Zealand's report to the governing body on the audit of Council for the year ended 30 June 2025, so last year's audit. I'm going to do a few introductory comments on this paper before passing over to Fiona Elkington from Audit New Zealand, who is our appointed auditor on behalf of the Auditor General, and she is the author of the report. So the Council's financial year runs to 30 June, and last year's annual report was adopted and the audit opinion issued on the 8th of October 2025. Each year at the conclusion of an audit, it's common practice for the audits to issue a report to the governing body on the overall findings of the audit. This is the first Audit and Risk Committee since our annual report was adopted, so it's our first opportunity to actually bring this paper to you, which then kind of concludes last year's audit. So I'm going to pass over to Fiona now.
So I'm pleased to present the report to Council. It is in a different format to what we've previously done because we've basically split out the lower level management findings and issued that as a separate report. So this is a report that covers the significant risks, the key areas that we were looking at during the audit. And I'll just give you a brief sort of summary of the key findings from the audit. We did issue a modified opinion, and that was in relation to the Scope 3 greenhouse gas measure, where we weren't able to get sufficient evidence at the time of signing the audit opinion. We've been doing a lot of work with the greenhouse gas inventory team, and we expect that going forward that will no longer be an issue. Appropriate disclosures were made last year in relation to the local waters done well, but that for this year will be an ongoing area, and there'll be a lot of accounting treatments and work being worked through this year as part of this year's audit in relation to the transition to the water assets to the new entity. Evaluations and fair value assessments were appropriate and accurate. There was an emphasis of matter in relation to the three waters and the unit rates area, which was consistent with the prior year valuation as well, and that's partly because the unit rates for Wellington were quite high, and that's from the Wellington Water and the contract rates that they have, and so that's what that related to and the uncertainties around those. Again, that will be looked at as part of the Three Waters valuation that was being undertaken this year, and it may result in another emphasis of matter again this year, but we'll just see where we get to because they'll have additional information. And we also did do a follow-up on the contract management and project management area, which we've been looking at over the past few years. So we have a specialist assurance person on our team who looks at that area, and she found similar findings to internal audit and had a discussion with internal audit, but could also see the improvements that were being made and the planned improvements going forward. So as part of our program, she will do a high-level follow-up again this year. And that was really the key audit findings. Does anybody have any questions? I guess would be the...
Thank you. I guess more of a comment, but it'll be good to see the Scope 3, that's been of many, many years. We've become very familiar, and I guess it's my understanding that Wellington City Council is sort of a front runner in this kind of area, which is one of the reasons why it's kind of
it's an evolving area. So yes, so I'm very hopeful that I'm hoping by the end of this week I'll be able to issue the letter of representation actually. But
Councillor Chung.
When we talk about the Wellington City Council doing things a little bit different to other territorial authorities, is that because we're actually looking at different ways of doing things, or where is it anything to do with our culture?
I'll perhaps answer that. So within things like climate change disclosures, what we look at is when there are new requirements across certain areas. So across listed companies, Auckland Council is required to do mandatory disclosures around climate. The climate emissions, we look at where things are mandatory for certain organisations and whether or not we should follow suit and what is good practice. Certainly from a Wellington City Council perspective, obviously we've had very strong environmental strategies. We've got Te Ata Kura. It made sense for us to look at how we could adopt those practices even though they're voluntary. Because actually it gives a level of transparency to the work that we're undertaking already. There's also calls from the likes of the Office of the Auditor General and other bodies to suggest that these kind of things should be mandatory across the board, whether or not you're listed or not. So we have been an earlier adopter of this. There are councils that have to make these disclosures, and so we're making those informed choices all the time in terms of actually sometimes it's better to adopt before it becomes an absolute must because it gives you time to practice, to evolve, to get the right systems and processes in place. So we make those judgments all the time and we look at what are the things that our public are really passionate about, and the climate and emissions is one.
All right, there appear to be no more questions. You might want to just sit there because I don't think we'll have a lengthy debate before we move to the next paper. Councillor Osborne was voluntold to move this paper. He promised a great speech.
Thank you, Chair, for the great honour of moving this paper. I actually just want to tautoko what you just said. It's really great to hear that we have improved our ability to measure our climate emissions. So, ka pai.
All right, I'm happy to second. Is there any debate? All right, we'll go to the vote. Thank you. We might not need apologies from the Mayor for early departure. All right, that is carried. Item 2.5, this is the audit plan and engagement letter. Go to the team.
All right. So the purpose of this paper is to present to you the two key planning documents for the audit of the current year ending 30 June 2026. The first one is the audit engagement letter, which covers the 4-year audit term to 30 June 2029. This letter outlines the terms of the audit engagement and the respective responsibilities of the council and of the appointed auditor. As the governing body, we request you to review the letter and provide any advice to the Mayor, who is the governing body member who will need to sign to accept that letter. As officers, we have reviewed the letter and we can confirm that the terms of engagement and the respective responsibilities are similar to previous years, and we have the appropriate processes in place to meet our stated responsibilities. The second report is the draft audit plan for the upcoming audit. This plan sets out Audit New Zealand's approach for the audit and outlines the key areas of focus. Under the Local Government Act, we are required to prepare and adopt the annual report by 31 October, and the plan that's been presented is aligned to meet that with a current proposed date of adoption of 22nd of October. The detailed timetable itself is still being refined, and at the May Audit and Risk Committee we will provide a more comprehensive timeline to adoption and outline the Audit and Risk Committee's responsibilities at each stage as we lead up to adoption date. At this early stage of the audit year, the planning and engagement between ourselves and Audit New Zealand are underway. The first interim audit actually begins next week, and we've continued to provide the auditors with frequent updates with respect to the work that is identified as the areas of focus. And I'm going to pass to Fiona for further comments.
Okay, so I'm pleased to present both of those documents. I'll just quickly go over the areas of focus for this year's audit. So we've got the local waters done well, which is really around all the disclosures there, the accounting there. We're doing a lot of work with management around the valuations and also the accounting treatment work. And of course we're liaising with the other appointed auditors for the other Wellington councils as well, because as much as possible we're trying to do this as efficiently and work together and sort of share resources, if you like, for that part of the audit. So that also includes a valuation of the 3 water assets. We're working quite closely across the 4 councils that are doing those valuations to get some synergies and efficiencies in how we're doing that work. The other areas are the rate matters. We're just going to do essentially what we would normally do as part of our rates review, but then just look at the progress that's been made against some of the issues that have come up, and just maybe we might have to do a further bit detailed testing than what we might normally do. I would point out that there has been a lot of rates issues come up across the country, so it seems to have been a bit of a pattern right across the country last year through councils. Impairment of assets, we will review that as a matter of course, and we'll liaise with Andrea and Karina here around any accounting treatment related to the wastewater plant. Procurement and contract management I've already alluded to. We'll just do a follow-up on where we were last year. We'll check in with the internal auditors around what they're doing and take it from there, but we'll just see how progress is improving. I don't know whether we'll keep it as a management report going forward or the qualified greenhouse gas performance measure. We're expecting that qualification to come off for this year and potentially the comparative from the year before. And risk of management overriders, where we do specific work around journals and other areas where potentially management could override the control. So, and I would point out that there's nothing being raised in that area when we did our work last year. Yeah, and my point, yes, we'll just keep liaising with what's happening with the inquiry and with the team here. But nothing that we're going to be specifically doing at this stage because it's too early, obviously, in the process. The other area that we didn't have a document for yet is the audit proposal, which would outline the fees. Normally that's for 3 years, but given the changes in the sector, all councils are just getting a 1-year fee letter this year to outline the fees for this year. There isn't expected to be a big increase at all, but there will be some areas that are not going to be covered by the base fee, and that will be the local waters done well and anything related to the out-of-cycle valuations where it's over and above what we would have potentially done in prior year. If that makes sense.
All right, great. Thank you both, and thank you for addressing the fees issue.
Yeah.
I was going to ask, go easy on us, Fiona.
I was actually hoping to have it, but unfortunately the timing of it, I'm due to get it quite soon back from the moderation process. So
wonderful, thank you. Councillor Rogers has a question.
Yeah, I was just looking at the dates that we were expecting to have both verbal and the final audit opinion issued, and then overlapping them with the currently scheduled committee dates. And it appears that for the current scheduling, the verbal clearance would be presented 7 days after the Council Planning and Finance Committee, and then the audit opinion would be issued on the same day as the Council meeting. So in terms of the actual audit opinion, would that be seen by a committee of the whole other than the governing body council?
Or you could have an alternative career as an auditor, Councillor Rogers, with that level of detail. That you're absolutely right. We need to look at the timing of the meetings. The meetings have been scheduled in accordance with our usual pattern, but as we've worked through with the auditor to make sure that we've got the right roles and responsibilities in the terms of reference for the relevant committees, there may be some juggling of timing and or extraordinary meetings, but we will work with DEM Services to achieve that. So we've given sort of more of a broad outline of what we need to do in terms of the timetable that we can commit to. We'll need to work around the meetings accordingly.
Just I guess the follow-up on that, if the audit opinion is being issued on the 22nd of October, I guess thinking about experiences in the past where we had kind of slightly less than 24 hours to review the finalised audit opinion, it would be helpful if we could have slightly longer than that 24-hour period if possible, noting that it has to be done by 31st of October.
Absolutely agreed and noted, yes.
All right. It appears there are no more questions. Thank you. I'm happy to move this paper, and actually Councillor Rogers, I was going to say, because I have noticed actually, we did have a couple of years there, and I understand there were resourcing issues and things like that, where we were stopping sort of the meeting, adjourning the meeting and waiting for, an audit report to come through, etc. So I really want to thank you, because we've really seen those kind of margins give us much more breathing room, which is greatly appreciated. So there you go, like there's a bouquet to go with you. Would someone like to second the paper? Mayor Little, thank you. I'm assuming there's no debate. We can go to a vote.
Oh, just one point.
Yes. Oh, sorry, Mayor.
Look, I fully accept everything. It's all very well done. I would just hope that in terms of the fees and the schedule of fee increases, that they might comply with the proposed schedule of rates cap increases.
Excellent point. Well made. We'll go to the vote. That is carried. We will now move to item 2.6. Oh, sorry, that's my paper. Sorry. Terrify. That was worse than some of the reports from earlier. 2.6, health and safety performance. Welcome Nomai, Wendy Henderson and Alice Ash. Ki te horo e te kōrero. The reason my papers are scraping my mic is because I was informed, because I have a loud voice, to keep my mic low. So I will be very careful.
Thank you, Chair. Alice and I will take the paper as read, but by way of a quick intro, I just wanted to touch on a couple of points. Recent organisational change has seen our internal security team be reintegrated with health and safety, so we welcome them back with open arms, and future papers may include anything of significance, and will weave in security as well. You may be aware that some of the proposed changes to the Health and Safety at Work Act have come out, and a key part of this is a real shift towards a system that prioritises critical risks and hazards likely to result in death, a notifiable injury, illness or incident. As a large PCBU, the organisation has, over the last 2 years, actually conducted quite a thorough review of all our critical organisational health and safety risks, which is really timely. You'll see in the report there's 29 identifiable risks that we have, and we'll continue to monitor those as part of a business as usual rolling review now that we've done quite a comprehensive review. And we'll continue to monitor the developments of the proposed changes to the Act and keep this committee informed as well as we know more. So happy to take any questions.
It appears that there are none. Thank you. Yes. Oh, we have one.
My apologies. Sorry, Chair. I just noticed the one of the biggest risks is what's described as confrontation, is it? Employer confrontation. Yeah. Is that confined to parking services? Is it across the board? Is it what's the sort of profile of that incidence?
Yeah, that's definitely across the board, so to speak. So not only in operational front-facing roles, but like our call centre, we've definitely seen an increase in the types of calls and personal confrontation that they are receiving. This has been ongoing for a while now, probably the overhang of COVID as well, and we've continued to monitor, review, support and put in place different mitigations around that.
One thing we have introduced, because we saw the category becoming so large, and 6 months ago we have done subcategories under personal confrontation to see the difference with what's antisocial behaviour and what's the violence and aggression, just so we can get more insight from those.
And with that, what analysis is that? What is the dividing line between those two categories of personal confrontation?
Violence and aggression we're seeing as to take up the bulk of the two.
And in terms, sorry, just one final question. In terms of response to that, on behalf of staff or for the benefit of staff, what are the range of responses that the council can take with those incidents?
There's a lot of different controls that we have that follow the hierarchy of controls. You've got your administration type controls, which is the training we provide, so personal confrontation and de-escalation. And there's other ways of how the business operates, so buddy systems, duress alarms, understanding the security protocols. So it really depends on the team that it works. They've got the whole local controls that they may undertake. And then we've got enterprise-wide ones which we encourage. Yeah.
Councillor Chung, you had a question.
Has there been any noticeable reduction in confrontational issues regarding our park enforcement officers since we introduced cameras, or has that remained steady?
So this is the GPS cameras that for the park. Yeah. So this is the parking. Some of the parking team now have GPS recognition, which they can go out to do tickets. So those ones, for the staff in those cars, we aren't seeing the same personal confrontation. That's definitely mitigated that. But the majority of the parking officers are still on foot. So yeah.
All right, it appears now there are no more questions. Thank you. All right, I'm happy to move this report, and I think it was good to hear your questions, Melittle, because for those that have been on this committee or seen the kind of the frequent reporting, we've seen an alarming escalation in the frequency and seriousness of personal confrontation over particularly in the post-COVID environment, and it's really been a core part of our health and safety work, and the training, and I think is also can be quite significant for elected members also in our experience of that, and that I think for that and many other reasons to see the security team incorporated into health and safety, that unit is a very positive development. So yes, just to make that comment. Pauiwi Kelly, would you like to second and speak? Thank you.
No, I don't.
Okay. Was there any debate?
Well, actually.
No, you are. Okay.
I want to thank. Oh, she's gone for the report.
Oh, no, there's there.
And the changes that have been implemented, because in my day job we have the same problems, and I was able to. Well, I won't say plagiarise, but get ideas from what we were doing here that have been really useful, and particularly using the same people that council have used for training for our staff and for the wider community. So it's not just a problem, if I could say this, it's not just a problem here at council, it is a bigger problem that does need to be addressed, particularly for frontline staff. And yeah, I'm happy to second the motion.
Thank you, Pauiwi. Liz, is there any debate? We'll go to a vote. Thank you. That is carried. We'll move on to item 2.67, the insurance update. No mai Sarah Houston-Estergaard. And Andrea Reeves, ki te horo e te kōrero.
Kia ora koutou. Andrew's voice has probably run out by now, so I'll have a go at. Hey, look, really light form. This is our quarterly insurance update, which is a standing item for this committee, or has been in the past. So I will take the paper largely as read, with one small apology in the publishing. One of the paragraphs has all been squished into one, so it's hard to read, but hopefully we got through that. Just a couple of points. It obviously gave a final roundup of last year's renewal process, which was exceeded expectations. We managed to get an extra $375 million worth of capacity across a couple of portfolio policies, so that was a good outcome. We are currently in the absolute thick of this year's renewal for the three main material damage policies, being the above ground, below ground and housing. I just wanted to touch briefly on some changes that we're looking to make this year, however. So we have rolled all of our policies to 1 July to line up with Te Āki-wai transfer of assets. And the below ground that I mentioned will no longer exist for us. It will be transferred across there with those assets. Two To better align our future state for insurance, we have asked our insurers to work with us on retaining 3 policies, the above ground being the vertical build, the buildings, etc. And we've colloquially named the other one the horizontal infrastructure, which is similar to what it was before, but now largely above the ground, so seawalls, roading and all those sorts of things, and then the housing remains intact. We have asked them to do that so that there is more of a lateral spread in our offering to the market, so that they will have more choice about which assets they choose to insure. And we have, in talks with our brokers, etc., we've been told that that will likely come with, again, another step up in capacity likely, and have some good outcomes given the soft market and market conditions. So that's what we're busy working on. And yeah, I'll leave it there. Other than to say we are very much involved in the Moa Point recovery process from an insurance perspective. We have our insurers working on it and have stood up a team there. I can't give much more at the moment, other than that we are working hard on that.
Well, thank you, Sarah. We'll go to questions. Councillor Randall.
Yes, thank you. Just with respect to Moa Point, just wanted to confirm that we are insured for Moa Point. What does the insurance cover, and do we have a, how much is in that insurance pool, and what can you say about that at this very early stage?
So I can tell you what insurance we have in place. So we have last year, that's the above ground policy that I spoke to a few minutes ago. It sits on that policy. It's a little bit interesting the way that's done. It's technically a water asset, but it's not with the other water assets because of its horizontal, upwards build, this way. So it does sit with their above ground infrastructure. It is insured to its full replacement value of 200 and approximately 15 million, there or thereabouts. The subcategories include the building itself, the mechanical components and the electrical components. I don't have an exact breakdown, but it's insured according to the schedules that we give to the insurers. It hasn't been revalued since 24-25 because it's not due to be, and so those declared values are what we have full insurance for. As I said before, we got really good outcomes, and there's no ventilation through that policy, so we do have full insurance up to that level on it. The overall policy itself is up to $650 million.
And just to follow up, look, I think our self-insurance approach has been a great success story within the council. I was wondering, and you're seeing it by working directly with the market, I was wondering, in terms of the transfer to Te Wai, is this council able to assist them in terms of some of the learnings that we have had in terms of getting insurance and making sure that the new entity will get both good cover but also value for money cover for the assets they're about to take on?
Yeah, so there is a separate work stream for Te Wai, which includes all of the CFOs, and there is a work stream within that on insurance. We are very cognizant of how we can apply those learnings and support Te Wai as they work through that process. What I would say is that the team here have been well planned and preparing for this. The fact that we've had a major damages insurance policy for the underground reflects that the team have been preparing to lift and shift and help. So this has all been in train for some time, and Sarah and the team have been thinking about this quite strategically to assist Te Wai. We will be going to the market at the same time as Te Wai. Clearly they need to do their own insurance policies, but we will be able to support them with the fact that we have, Sarah and myself have been with the London market. We know many of the players. We're again going there and alongside someone from Te Wai. So we will do our utmost to support them without overstepping our bounds, quite clearly that we have the same insurance broker as well. So we will do everything that we can because these are Wellington's assets to support them, but and that includes highlighting areas where we think they can improve, and we'll continue to have that conversation, particularly as CFOs, but I bring Sarah into the conversation when needed.
Thank you.
It's noted in the decision register update that we're going to have an update on the captive at the next quarterly, and I'm just wondering, a very brief 101, because some new councillors might not know what a captive is, and I'm just kind of interested in what impact having the captive, I mean, you kind of referred to the self-insurance, but having a captive might have in an incident like a Moore Point, touch wood, hopefully not that there are any others.
Yeah. Okay. Yes. So we have received a draft of the Phase 2 report, which we agreed with the previous. Last time we were here, we said we would share it through. We can probably email that out offline. Geordie's excited for it.
Very excited. He'll read it first, I'm sure.
I can hypothesise, I guess. First and foremost,
just briefly explain what a captive is.
Oh, certainly. Captive insurance is effectively a CCO of council that is set up specifically to purchase and manage risk specifically relating to insurance. So the best example that exists in local government, as close to here as possible, is the Gold Coast City Council, I think, whichever council it is in the Gold Coast, and they've had one of these in play for 19 years, and it's an absolute success for them. They run all of their risk through that now, and it's a lot more than just an insurance company, but that's effectively what we're talking about, is for the sole purpose of insuring Wellington City's assets. We can extend that to our CCOs, but not wider. And it's an entity that we can put in place. The key benefits to it would be that it would manage all of this risk. It can take on some of that risk itself. It can essentially sell us insurance and then rebuy that insurance back to back in the reinsurance market. So stop me if I'm getting too far into Geordie's territory, but sorry, but it essentially will be amazing. And you put capital into that, it can grow capital and can provide more of that self-insurance on an arm's length, really safe basis, because it's very well governed and looked after, etc. The capital you put in can attract a return similar to what insurance markets do, but on a smaller basis, obviously, but they can offset that risk into the insurance markets, and it's a more sophisticated way. These entities have been around for a long time. There's lots of them around. They are largely set up, or often set up, I won't say solely, but for where there's insurance retreat. So it's a bad example, but if you think of oil companies that simply can't get insurance for their assets because no one wants to invest in that sort of thing anymore, they will set up a self-insurance for any sort of big disasters and things like that. So it's the first one that comes to mind, but sorry, it's not a great example. But those are the sorts of reasons why organisations set them up. What we're suggesting is Wellington is a known area for high risk in the seismic risk category, and because of that insurance, insurance around town is becoming astronomically expensive anyway, so it will take some of that froth out of the market. It will put some of that available capacity to Wellington to one side so that we're not buying all of that capacity. So, supply and demand will hopefully inadvertently help households, but I'm hypothesising now that the key tricky part of that is the legislation or the regulations in New Zealand means that these entities get caught up in the same level of regulation and capital requirements as a Vero or a big insurance company, and so they're not viable, really, to run in New Zealand. So Phase 2, the captive feasibility study, talks about, it addresses that, and it recommends a couple of different domiciles which are out of New Zealand without spilling all the secrets, it has suggested a Guernsey Island or a Singapore for the best fit for Wellington City Council. But like I say, we can share that report with you on a draft basis, and you can interact with that and hopefully get less waffly explanations than what I've just given you, Rebecca. Sorry.
I asked you to sort of condense a very, thank you.
Yeah.
Anything else?
Just thinking back, the reflection on what's happening with Moa Point, again, hypothetically, the deductible that we will have to pay before the insurance kicks in would definitely be sitting and come out of that captive rather than coming off our balance sheet here at Council. So that's the first impact that we would have probably seen in the process so far. I'm not sure how it would play out further on down the track, though.
Councillor Rogers has a question.
Yeah, it is only a question now that I've had that explanation. I was just wondering, when we received increased cover with the placements that we got this year, whether there were any changes in the strategy we used for placement in the stack and whether it created accepted liabilities somewhere else lower down, or whether we've just simply increased the upper limit.
So two things played out last year in that result. So previous years we insured to 450, so that was our upper limit, whereas now it's 650, I think, or drop the 50, 600. Anyway, so it has increased in terms of the stack going up like that. But previous years we also had something called ventilation, which was basically you have these layers of insurance, the insurers tell us where they want to attach and buy and what layers. There were some of those layers that weren't fully subscribed to, so that's what we call ventilation. So that actually played out in the Windwand claim, where we have ventilation in the waterfront policy, and we ended up paying a lot of that ourselves because those layers, it didn't go up through any of the top layers, and we had a lot of that capacity at the bottom. So we have filled all the way from top to bottom above our deductible. So it should all come from insurance, assuming it's on the register and it's covered by the policy.
Fantastic. Can I ask one more now? Yes. And were there any changes to the level of our deductibles across our policies?
No, they remain consistent.
Awesome work.
I think that's the end of the questions. Thank you both. Councillor Randall, would you like to move this paper? Voluntold?
Yes, I'd love to move this paper. As I say, this is one of the things that I think that this council dived into and has built from to become a relatively successful process and a cost-effective process. Our insurance costs, of course, are huge, being in an earthquake-prone zone, as CFO just outlined. And so I'm very pleased that we've had a focus, an innovative way to tackle our costs on this, and it's been a success so far, fingers crossed, and it also that the officers have an intention to make it even more of a success. So very good, thanks.
Vaughan is seconding.
Thanks, Chair. I'd just note that relatively successful from Councillor Randall is very high praise indeed.
All right, is there any debate? We'll go to the vote. Thank you. That is carried. Item 2.7, the decision register updates and upcoming reports. And just to note that the amended substantive that we're noting that the item coming to the May meeting on insurance update and the next steps towards the captive. Is there any questions? Are you the person? Oh, it's Andrea again. Is there any questions of Andrea about the... Councillor Rogers.
I guess it's just around the paper that would be coming as noted in Clause 2, what impact that would have on sequencing over the annual plan in terms of capitalising the captive, whether it has to be an annual plan, long-term plan sort of thing?
We will provide that advice when we come. We haven't worked through all of the detail of that, but that would certainly be part of the advice that we would bring you. Yeah.
Looks like there are no further questions. I will move this. Pauiwi Kelly will second. We'll go to the vote. Sorry, I'm assuming no debate. Nobody indicated. That is carried. I now move that we go into public excluded, the reasons as noted with regards to the litigation update. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Mayor Little. We'll vote to go into public excluded. That is carried. We'll take a minute to change the signs. Turn off the live stream.